I'm also going to speak a little bit now why infill development's not that hard. And there's kind of 4 points that I think that help infill developers get to where they want to go. And I think first and foremost is the old Apple, think differently. With infill development, you do have to think differently. You can't take a template approach or approach that may have worked in a conventional or a greenfield development and utilize it in any infill circumstance here. There's certain practices that may follow, but in terms of your actual detailed approach and how you plan to go through something, you just can't jump into it and say, okay, this is what worked in this location and it'll work here and we'll keep moving on. Understand the community and context. That is by far a very, very important attribute that as an infill developer that you definitely want to follow. Get to know the neighborhood, get to know the block, get to know the businesses, get to know how that site integrates and functions within that community. The more homework you do as a developer to get yourself familiar with the site and to understand the pros and cons, the better off you'll be in terms of bringing your development forward. It's not one of those where you can just simply pull up something on a map and take a look at it, or do a Google Street View and say, okay, this is kind of what's surrounding it. We have a single detached house here, we have a couple businesses to the south, and away we go. Your influence extends beyond the site, and the best thing you can do is essentially just get into the nitty-gritty details and understand it. Be transparent. As a developer, the last thing you want to do is go in and try to be sneaky about things, knowing that there might be opposition, there might be a conflict or disagreement. The more you can sort of put your cards on the table, the better off you'll be. Work with the municipal administration, and very, very important one. At the end of the day, oftentimes when you go into these, you automatically think, okay, we're going into this, they're going to, they're against us here, and we have to sort of spearhead this as quickly as we can and push it through, because time is money and the market can change on a whim, and before you know it, we could lose an opportunity here. You can't go about that with infill development. Use the people on the municipal side as your allies, and actually ones that you can work with through the process. So I'm going to speak a little bit more on the think different aspect. If you do good things will happen. And that's kind of a philosophy I know at Belgen that with Ivan and myself, that's one of our sort of philosophies from a developer standpoint, saying, well, if you do good things at a certain site, good things will ultimately happen. Going back, infill does require an unconventional or an unorthodox approach to things. You have to go in there also anticipating specific types of delays. If you go in there assuming that, yes, we'll just be able to sort of move forward, and because council and the mayor say that this is what they want to see, we'll just be able to sort of take down any of the roadblocks either from the public or the administration side, and away we go. That's certainly not the way it works, and it definitely won't work in your favor if that's the approach you wish to take. Your development program has to be customized. And that's going back to sort of the whole notion of you can't use conventional approaches and you can't use templates. And as an infill developer, each site has its own different characteristics. And you simply just can't think, well, this works here, and we'll be able to cut and paste this and use it in any other infill site. There are certain elements you'll be able to carry forward, depending on what it may be, but you ultimately are starting from scratch with each and every site. And that takes a little bit more effort and collaboration amongst your own in-house staff and consultants and the community and administrators. Understand the community and its context. Again, become into it with that site, block, neighborhood, and the people. Meet with neighbors in the community league early on in the process. Don't assume saying, well, they're just going to be notified by the city or municipality and we'll get back to them if they raise a lot of noise. I mean, the reality is you want to know essentially at the end of the day the community is. It's like an iceberg. I mean, you just don't know exactly what lies below the surface. But if you actually meet with them early on, and you actually get to know what some of their concerns may or may not be, or what level of support they would have for such a proposal, you can determine more or less, well, okay, if we kind of make a few quick changes to our development program early on, we can avoid certain issues. And that's something that you know, you definitely want to do. Establish dialogue early. Again, communication is key, and don't be afraid of the community. Work with them. You ultimately know that you're not going to get consensus from everybody. There will be certain groups, depending on what it is, that may not agree with your proposal, know how many times you change it, revise it to appease them. Some will go in with the attitude saying that, no, we just simply don't like it, and that's that. And you have to you have to expect that. But you have to work with the best, with the people as best as you can in order to advance things. It also establishes trust. One thing in the development aspect is trust sometimes can easily erased. And that, by virtue, is just that if you, as a developer, you choose not to act and be proactive, some people may make assumptions saying, oh, what aren't they telling us? And why aren't we finding out about this? And how can we have to find about this way? Again, be transparent and work with them, and I think you'll be much, much better off. Again, going back to putting all your cards on the table, and don't play games. The last thing you want to do is to try to play these games saying, well, we'll go into this, and then, you know, they'll probably find out about that, and then we'll do it this way, and we'll go back and revise it, and we'll kind of make it look like we made a bunch of concessions. People are smarter than that. You know, we're dealing with access to information nowadays that people can learn things pretty quickly. Now, of course, depending on the sources of information they're drawing this from, they may be slightly inaccurate. But nonetheless, people have a lot of access to information nowadays. Whereas, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it took a lot more to see that type of to get that information. I mean, with a click of a button, going on to Google, going on to municipal websites, you can learn things pretty quick, and people can educate themselves fairly easy. So the more as a developer you can be transparent and assume, saying, well, you know, they're just a neighborhood, they really don't know much, or they really don't know the process. You'd be amazed how quickly they can educate themselves. And the last thing you want to do is having them challenge you on something that you ultimately could have, you know, dealt with it at the beginning, and wouldn't be sitting in front of a mayor or council saying, hey, what about this? It's one of those things where you have to you put all your cards on the table is ultimately at the end of the day. And again, don't profess to know it all. Use the community to help improve your project as well. Again, as a developer, we don't know everything. We rely a lot on our consultants, what they're hearing from the neighborhood, or what they know in terms of development. We rely on, obviously, the market. We rely on the neighborhood. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, what you develop in that community, those are your end users, may they be purchasers or renters or people using the businesses that you're developing along the main floor. So you want to leverage that at the end of the day from a developer. And I think the best way to do that is again, having that open communication and transparency. Ultimately, the communication can actually help you improve your project. Another one is working with administration. You know, again, don't consider administration a approval roadblock. They play an important role in seeing that project come to light. And they can actually be your ally in terms of helping bridge the gap between the community and yourself if you're found in a circumstance where proactive measures just weren't able to sort of get some of the community members on side for whatever reason it may be. The people on the municipal side definitely can be your allies. And they can also bring information that you may not have been able to sort of determine and find out from the community by virtue of their interactions. So don't see them as saying, oh, okay, well, I have to go through this approval process and they're going to use all this stuff against us and it's going to take us several months. And if you go in with that adversarial manner, it's not going to end well for you, and it's going to actually make the process a lot longer and a lot more difficult than it could have been. Again, let them contribute to the project as well. Improvements and changes to your project doesn't necessarily mean it will cost more money. And I've always maintained the philosophy that good design actually doesn't cost a lot of money. Good design just requires creativity. And if you're thinking about that off the hop, that's something that you'll see at the end of your design be much more better. And having that collaborative design, not just being, you know, in the boardroom with your consultants and yourself, but outside, maybe the community and also the municipality, can help you actually come to develop a better project from a design standpoint, versus putting all this effort and time, and then you go through the process only to realize that some small design changes you could have made in the beginning could have saved you a whole bunch of time at the end. So, early engagement with your municipal administrators is very important as well. Don't just say, okay, we're going to submit an application and see where it goes. And as a consultant, I've worked with guys that take that approach, and oftentimes it doesn't end very well. And now, as more being in the developer standpoint, I mean, you understand the benefits of it. And sometimes, yeah, it brings up issues, but those issues are likely going to come up through the process anyways. So you're better off being proactive versus reactive at the end of the day. Be flexible and be prepared to make changes as well. Don't go in there with the mindset saying, well, we can't make this change because of A, B, and C. You have to understand that from a municipal standpoint, in their perspective, they're going to be ensuring that the project meets multiple policy plans, guidelines, etc., anything that's applicable to the site. And administration, on the administration side, they also have to be flexible. You can't go in saying, this is a policy and be damned if we're going to have any different interpretation of it. It's either yes or no. Again, that flexibility and working collectively is going to lead to a better process and ultimately, I think, a better project.